Almost 6 years ago, I did a video on the 5 cheapest V10s you could buy for under 10k, and now that video doesn't work anymore. With V10s becoming rarer by the minute, I've had to up the budget to 15k, and even then we're limited. But let's get straight into it. Hit like to see more videos like this, subscribe as well if you're new, and let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Let's kick this video off with the strangest V10 on the list, as it's the only diesel, the VW Touareg V10 TDI. Another example of VW showing the world that when they let their engineers loose, they can really pull out some absolutely mental cars. This was the era of VW making the W12 Phaeton and the Continental and the W16 Veyron, and yet somehow a V10 diesel family SUV is more ridiculous as a car that's supposed to actually be practical and useful with a supercar inspired powertrain made diesel. It's also from the era of the diesels, with VW spearheading that charge, and though of course that ended in tears a few years later, VW Group definitely were at the top of the diesel game. Think about the Audi R10 TDI, a multiple Le Mans winning race car that destroyed its petrol competition, winning 36 of the 48 races it entered. As mentioned, these come with the only diesel engine on the list, a 5-litre twin turbocharged V10 block to be exact, that makes 308 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 7.6 seconds, which is pretty decent for a car of its size, and more importantly, it puts out 750 Nm of torque, absolutely mental. For anyone who's driven a VW Group car of the early 2000s era, everything outside of that engine will seem pretty normal, but what this car can do is completely abnormal. For example, when it was used to pull a Boeing 747, which weighed in at 155 tons. So you should never have to worry about pulling a trailer. This is the joint most expensive car on the list thanks to that rarity, coming in at £15,000 at the bottom end, and you'll be looking at 2008 model with 95,000 miles on the clock for that kind of money. As it's so rare, it's hard to find the full reliability history of them, but oil leaks appear to be the most common problem I could find on forums, as well as the fact that getting parts for that V10 can be more difficult as it's not your average VW Group engine. I've always thought the Audi S8 is a pretty strange car from the Audi brand, as it sits somewhere between being a performance car and a luxury car. Of course, with the A8 badge you can get yourself a more luxurious car than the S8, the A8 LW12 for example, and in most Audi cars you can get something more aggressive with the RS badge, which the S8 never got. So it's a weird one, but this car still has a massive cult following, creating generations of S8 success. This was only the second generation S8, which arrived in 2006 after the first gen ended production in 2003. That first gen had the perfect formula for a generation that loved villain cars, fast, luxurious, and a bit of a sleeper, and the second gen tried to capture some of that formula while getting a bit more modern and of course adding a V10 engine into the mix. These come with the largest engine on the list, a 5.2 litre V10 that puts out 443 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 4.9 seconds, which is plenty quick for a car that's only half focused on performance, with the other half being all about luxury. I don't think the second gen is as iconic as the first gen, but the fact that that engine is not a million miles away from the block you get in the Gallardo does help. They're not actually the same block though, it's actually more similar to the 4.2 litre V8 you get in other Audis, just with an extra couple of cylinders attached. They'll run you around £7,000 at the bottom end, making this the cheapest car on the list by a long way, and £15,000 will get you a 2007 model with around 90,000 miles on the clock. Carbon buildup is the most common issue with that engine, which obviously needs cleaning out every so often if the car isn't being revved out properly or is being used with bad oil. It's broadly a more reliable platform for its era of Audi though, and instead it's typical luxury car issues you might expect, like the air suspension going. The next two cars on this list share a lot of similarities, as you'll see. The first is the BMW M6, a grand touring focused beaut from BMW that is rapidly appreciating in price. There were 16 years between the previous generation M6 and this model, which arrived alongside the iconic M5, more on that shortly. But the M6 came as both a coupe and convertible, and with some serious kit, including the SMG automated manual gearbox, the carbon fibre roof, aluminium used throughout the build to save weight, and of course a top speed of 190 miles per hour, pretty insane. You'll get one of the most iconic engines in the BMW lineup in one of these, a 5-litre V10 block that came from BMW's F1 activities, putting out 499 brake horsepower, taking the car to 60 in 4.5 seconds, and with one of the most beautiful soundtracks to ever come from a car, let alone a V10. That engine won International Engine of the Year in 2005 and 2006, and won multiple other engine-related awards between 2005 to 2008 because of how incredible it was. As BMW were making engines in Formula 1 at the time, with BMW Sauber to be exact, and with that V10 being sacked off for the 2006 season, it was a nice ode to the V10 in F1, hence they sound so F1-like. £11,500 is the minimum you'll find these listed for, and they're pretty hard to come by within our 15k limit regardless, so you'll be getting into a 2005 model that's done around 100,000 miles. Sadly, reliability on these is not something you're you'll necessarily want to shout home about. I've spoken to some owners that have had no issues at all, and though maintenance bills have been quite expensive, nothing more than you would expect out of a car with a V10 engine. However, online you'll see a bunch of issues, particularly with the SMG gearbox, with the red cog of death being the most well-known problem, alongside the rod bearings, which are a pretty expensive job to resolve. So I hope you guys are enjoying this video. If you are, then do hit the like button and subscribe as well if you're new, and let me know in the comments down below what is the greatest V10 car ever made. I'll let you know my thoughts at the end of this video. Built on the same platform as the M6 with many of these same parts and components, is arguably the more iconic M5, and in my opinion probably the most iconic generation of the M5, except maybe for the E39 M5, but I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments down below. Unlike the M6, there were multiple previous generations of M5, hence the badge holds a bit more of an iconic status I think in most people's books, and attaching a V10 engine into the mix just made it more mental. It actually came as both a saloon and estate, and personally I'd have to go for the Touring, though of course it's way outside of our price range given over 20,500 saloons were built versus just 1,025 Tourings. What's crazy though is I made this exact video 5 to 6 years ago for under 10k instead, and M5s were readily available for that kind of price, so in 5 years we've seen some serious growth in the prices of these beasts, and you can already see the best example sitting at some properly high prices. It of course shares its engine with that M6, a 5-litre V10 block that makes 499 brake horsepower, taking the car to 60 in 4.5 seconds, so same exact specs, with 4 doors rather than 2, and the same iconic soundtrack. Those figures made it the fastest 4-door saloon available on release, matching that 190 mph max speed of the M6, and managing a Nürburgring lap time of 8 mins 13 seconds. You'll likely find some categorized examples under 15k, but every so often you'll find a decent one with high mileage from around 2005, so they are gettable for our price range. Reliability is the same as the M6 of course, so nothing major to add here, but it's worth mentioning that if you are buying one of these, you're buying an appreciating classic at this point, so you should expect to look after it as such. If you want a more reliable, less ridiculously engined M5, you can literally buy the following generation, which was quicker, more practical, and arguably better in most ways. Thanks to my friends at Motorland, I recently had the opportunity to drive a C7 Audi RS6, and I was absolutely blown away by just how fast it was. The predecessor to that car was this, the C6 RS6, which came with a V10 engine instead, and if it even holds a candle to the C7 in terms of performance, it'll be mesmerizingly quick. Like the M5, the RS6 came as both a saloon and estate, with the estate being the one that really gained a huge cult following and ultimately wider popularity, hence more recent generations have ended up exclusively coming as Avants. On release it was Audi's single most powerful car ever, and it was quicker and more powerful than its main competitors, the EC3 AMG and the M5 we just spoke about. And given Audi are known for making incredible inline 5 engines, doubling the cylinders only makes sense. It isn't a V10 known for its sound like that in the M5 and M6, but it is still a great sounding block that makes serious power. These come with a 5-litre twin turbocharged V10, but not a diesel one this time, which puts out 571 brake horsepower, significantly more than all the other cars on this list, but it will still only get to 60 0.1 seconds quicker than the BMWs at 4.4 seconds, which is still pretty rapid. The only thing I'll say as someone who recently drove an RS6 and drove a same generation RS4 is that the performance you get out of these is completely otherworldly. No one needs the levels of performance these things offer considering how practical they are. £13,500 is the minimum you'll find these listed for, and £15,000 will get you into a 2008 example that's done around 100,000 miles. There's a well-known oil pump seal problem which is a super cheap component but is often an engine out job to actually replace, so can cost thousands. The oil temperature sensor can also fail, and there are multiple other leaks known. All in though, I would consider it similarly to the M5 at this point. It's a lovely car for the money, but with a V10 engine expect to maintain it like a V10. So there we have it, the 5 cheapest V10s. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, then do hit the like button and subscribe as well if you're new, and don't forget to let me know in the comments down below what the best V10 ever is. I personally would go for the Carrera GT. Anyway, click on screen to see another video on some cheap V8s instead.